Hello, so this is my video about how I did my Stargrave crew. I did one last week about how I made the ship. There's the ship. So check that out. I'm going to look at the sort of the inspirations, the artistic process, and just how I use Blender and the modelling software. Stargrave's this fun new game. You get to create all your own ships and things like that, so that is brilliant. The instructions clearly say start off with the captain, so I am doing this the wrong way round, where I'm going to start off with the ship. Then I'm going to create the crew, and I'm going to probably finish next week, hopefully, with the captain. Now, I've decided to do a robotic crew, and the internet is full of loads. There's so many people creating fantastic content for 3D printers, so many amazing looking, sort of sexy, sleek, kung fu robots, that I decided just not to do that, because what's the point? Someone's already done that. So I'm going to make my own take on the robots. And also, I was thinking most robots aren't that sexy, aren't that? The robots we see, Mars rovers, the stuff like Boston Dynamics, stuff like that. These are the robots you see, and they look a bit weird, and you can see how they're put together. So I wanted a little bit of that in my designs with some drawings. Now, I've done some drawings, sort of, I did some last year, did some a while ago, of different weird looking robots that I quite liked, and I wanted to do something in that vein, although these robots weren't that printable, lots of really thin arms that would just snap and never work. And I came up with an idea that perhaps in the future or in a far off galaxy, after you die, you can pay to have your head sort of planted on a post-mortality unit, and you could use that to visit your grandchildren's birthday party, and it would be horrific. I also did just these design load of weird little cute, quite impractical robots that I did really like. I love these sort of weird little boxes with arms. So that's where I'd started, and that's where I got to. So this then became the first model I made, which was actually the one that was in the end of the last video, and with a little sort of boxy guy with a brain in it. Perhaps this was the brain of somebody that had been implanted into the robot, and thus, technically, for the rules of this game, it does count as a cyborg because it's got a human brain. It's robot and person. I'm saying that counts, yeah? So I did that, but I don't know. The idea that with this little guy, he couldn't pick stuff up. He could just fire a gun. And maybe that wasn't that great for scavenging. And if people like these designs, you know, eventually I will make these designs. But I decided, no, let's make it a little bit more. Let's just up the practicality just a few notches, shall we? After a few failed attempts at making something a bit more humanoid-like, decided it's time to beef it up a little bit. Maybe these models were a little bit too bendy and impractical, so that is where I got to. So we ended up with this, which was my first sort of attempt. It's got that sort of junkiness, it's got those other bits, but let's have a little look now at the modelling process. So in Blender, which is the best and free modelling software, you start off with these sort of what they call primitives, which are sort of basic shapes, cubes, cylinders, prisms, that sort of stuff. You then just have to manipulate them. They're all made with faces, vertices, just like, you know, the maths you did at school. Turns out that was really useful, especially the stuff to do with space and shape. You just sort of manipulate stuff. So you turn these basic shapes by pulling bits out, extruding, which means sort of pulling out, pushing out faces, and then grabbing corners or vertices, as us mathematicians like to say. What you can see with this one that I'm doing a lot of is finding sort of pivot points, where to make the circles, I'll find a pivot point, and then I can rotate stuff around that pivot to make a load of different shapes. And then it's all just copying and repeating and copying. So I've turned what was a really basic shape into a chainsaw with just lots of pushing and pulling, copying and repeating. And this is sort of one of the ways that Blender will operate. There is another way which is more of a sculpting way, which is similar to the ZBrush or ZBrush, but I think they call it ZBrush. ZBrush and Blender in sculpt mode will start off with a bit more of a sort of lump of clay you can push and pull, which is great for faces and organic looking stuff. But if you want hard surface stuff like robots, it's best to do it, I think at least, with just these shapes and just moving, pushing, pulling, rotating, spinning, extruding, insetting, all these things. And once you've played with it for a while, with quite a few basic functions, you can just sort of make so many different shapes. Quick word from our sponsor.
At Mindpool, death is a window that you get to climb through and explore. We have the technology to bring you back, so you don't miss any special moments. Our Mortality Plus program offers you the free use of one of our post-life units. All you need to do is donate some of your brain's processing power to us, and we'll make sure you never miss a thing. Users are obliged to fulfill minimum service allocations. Failure to meet processing requirements may result in repossession of your living assets or where Mindpool reserves the right to alter your free will without notice.
I needed to make some more robots because this was going to be a crew of 8, so I needed some more people in it. So what I decided to do was I looked at sort of robots we see. Now, obviously, we've seen the Boston Dynamic robots. We've seen stuff like the Mars rovers as well. And these are sort of, I wanted to incorporate some of this, particularly with the legs. Now, Boston Dynamics have got these amazing sort of self-righting, balancing legs on wheels, which looks really good. So I thought, right, I'll do something along those lines, sort of make a sort of vaguely diesely, punky version of that, because that's what I like to do. And also, I had a look at the Mars rover. Now, the Mars rover has these cool little wheels that are sort of, you've got independent, I don't know what they're called, axles, but then the axles are on another axle, and it's all really good for climbing rocks. So that would be good. If it works on Mars, it's going to work in whatever galaxy this is. So I decided, yeah, let's do that one next. Incorporated that into some of the designs. Then I printed them. And they were rubbish because the little legs, it works really well when you're Boston Dynamics and you've got millions of pounds to spend on really complicated servos and self-righting mechanisms or whatever it is they put in them. But when it's a little 28mm figure, it falls over, so it's rubbish. So I've had to redesign that, and for that one I have just put in a third leg. So it's got a third leg so it stands up. I will include the 2-legged versions in it on our website, but I wouldn't recommend it. But it's there. If you want to spend a day trying to get a tiny thing to glue to a base, then that's up to you, isn't it? Yeah. The other thing with these models is that I really wanted some modularity, because there are rules about when you bring on new crew. Now, I've yet to play a game, so I don't actually know how useful these rules are, because I haven't got my crew to play the game to see what I need my crew to be like. You see, it's a catch-22 situation I'm stuck in here. So I am going to make the heads swappable. I mean, they're really tiny, so not like easily, but technically you could swap it if you're careful, and then you can decide whether it can be a robot or a cyborg. They're the robots I made. Let's have a look at the printed versions. Here they are. I'm quite pleased with how they turned out. Here they are. There's 8 in total. There's 1 in the ship, which is just waiting over there. I think it's fallen over because I've not yet glued bases on because they're that new. But yeah, quite pleased. I've worked out. They should have most of the stuff. Like I say, I've not played Stargrave yet, so I've still got to work out sort of my strategy. I'm not a very good person at making strategies, if I'm honest. I'm just generally a sort of throw it together when it comes to gaming and then lose. So I've included stuff like, we've got the little guy with the deck for hacking into stuff and opening doors. We've got a med pack somewhere on this guy. It's fallen off. We've got a med pack. We've got all your grenade launchers. I've done my sort of the little carbine or combine weapon it is. And then what I've done, which I've just noticed there, is I've not glued the heads on. The heads can be glued on, but also if you get to the point in the game where you're bringing new people onto the board and you get to choose whether they're cyborgs or robots, you can pull off the little robot heads or cyborg heads, swap them for a robot. So you can decide. Next, we'll be trying to work out who is going to be the leader of my robots, the captain. And that will be a video for hopefully next week, if I get enough time to do that. I have no real idea. I understand now why they said start with the captain, because apart from there's this sort of empty space where there should be a captain guy, but there is no captain guy. I need to get some bases. What kind of company would be able to harvest a load of human brains or heads to put into cyborgs to make them do work against their will? I don't know. There it is. Like the video, follow me around, press the bell, it makes no sound. Like the video, press subscribe, I don't know why I am alive.